All right. Good evening, everybody. As our participants start to log on, I just want to welcome everybody again to another night of the 2024 Master Beef webinar series. We're super excited to have you here again tonight. I've got two special guests here with us tonight, here to talk more with us. Dr. Ken Odde and Miss Jennifer Houston. And with all of that being said, just a quick reminder that you're welcome to use the chat box as well as the Q&A box to ask questions throughout their presentations. And we'll be sure to get those answered either during their presentation or at the end of when they're speaking. And so with all that being said, I'll let them get started.
Okay, Mallory, let me start out by introducing myself. My name is Ken Odde, and I live in north central South Dakota. I'm a retired college professor. We have a ranching business. I'm in a ranching business with my son, my wife, my daughter-in-law. We run about 500 beef cows, a Simmental Angus operation. So I'll be talking a little bit about that in a few minutes. My background is I'm a graduate of South Dakota State. I had a couple of years in the Army. I was earned my advanced degrees, DVM and PhD from Kansas State University. Was on the faculty at Colorado State University for 11 years. Did several years in industry working for Pfizer Animal Health. Then 4 years at North Dakota State, and then I spent my last 15 years ending in 2022 back at Kansas State University. Tonight, what I'm going to do is talk about a topic called genetic merit pricing. So the whole idea here is about how do we establish, I'll call them, if you want to use this language, scoring systems for feeder cattle that really quantify genetic value. And so I am a facilitator on a national task force that Jennifer Houston is also a part of, that is has a goal of increasing the utilization of quantitative genetic information in the marketing of feeder cattle. So this task force has about 30 people, and it represents people from all over the country, from all segments of the industry, including cow-calf, stocker, backgrounder, feedlot, processor, and with the goal that I mentioned previously. So what I'm going to do tonight is talk a little bit about that, but I'm going to start out with a little more background information on feeder cattle marketing in general. And I would argue that feeder cattle in general, if we go back in time, most feeder cattle were sold with little accompanying information. And we still have a lot of this today as well, but I use this example here. These are good black calves, and they've had all their shots. And that is kind of the level of genetic information or even calf health information for some calves today. And we think that we can help producers and we can help buyers by having quantitative systems that really define the genetic value of those calves, particularly in regard to the terminal traits, which are what we're going to see feedlot buyers really particularly interested in. I'll talk about that a little bit more. I do think the industry has changed, certainly in my career, and I've been around this for a long time. But in the 1990s, I think we really saw some movement on the area of calf health. And I think we have been selling a lot more calves in the industry with accompanying calf health information. And I would attribute that to some leadership, starting with Superior Livestock back in around the early 90s, maybe the mid 90s, when they established a set of calf health programs, and those were VAC 24, VAC 34, VAC 45, and VAC Precon. So a VAC 24 calf is a calf that was vaccinated at branding and then sold off the cow at weaning. A VAC 34 would be a branding and a pre-weaning vaccination and sold off the cow. VAC 45 are calves that have been weaned for at least 45 days and have at least 2 rounds of a 4-way viral vaccination with a Pasteurella vaccination as well. And then VAC Precon calves are actually like VAC 45, except they're put together calves. They're not off the ranch calves. And that program, and I for many years was involved in a project where we were measuring the impacts of these various programs on calf prices. And over time, it didn't happen overnight. It took some time, but over time, we began to see some rather significant price differences in calves that had reduced risk of disease. And I show that in the next slide. And I would say these are roughly, these aren't the same every year, but a VAC 34 calf, roughly worth about $4 a hundredweight more on 500-pound calves compared to calves that were not in a program. And a VAC 45 about $8 a hundredweight. In some years that would be as high as 10, and with these higher calf prices right now, it might even be a little bit more than that. But so there clearly was price advantages to having calves enrolled in calf health programs. And when you start to really look at that and analyze that, it really did begin to move the market. So we begin to see it not just in video auctions, but we certainly begin to see more of it going on in our livestock auction markets as well.
Dr. I don't mean to interrupt you. We seem to have a little bit of a volume issue, so do you mind to maybe scoot closer to your microphone or computer? Maybe that might fix the issue. I apologize.
Maybe I'll try to talk louder. So
there we go. That sounds great too. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's okay. I appreciate that. So anyway, I would argue that today we have more calf health information, and we've made some progress on that side, but we have still have little genetic information. And when I say that, what I mean is, in my part of the world, we may have a lot of calves that are now sold with purchased bulls from, and then name the seed stock producer. So that is some genetic information, but it's not the quantitative information that we're really talking about. So we think there's a lot of room for progress on the genetic side. So what are we interested in then? We're interested in using genetic information, primarily EPDs, and in some situations, perhaps genomics, to see if we can better predict these terminal traits: feedlot gain, feed efficiency, quality grade, yield grade, carcass weight. So we generally just talk about this as feedlot performance and carcass traits and carcass merit. And we think we have some tools out there today that are, I'll call them pretty good, pretty decent at predicting this kind of performance. So how do we get those tools utilized? And then how do we move this into the marketplace where it becomes much more common, where buyers can have confidence in the genetic differences that they may see in a particular set of calves? And so this is what we're primarily focused on in the genetic merit pricing task force. Is we're focused on I'll call them tools or programs that help us predict feedlot performance and carcass merit. And there's a number of those out there in the industry, and I'll talk about a few, mostly just about one. But if you have questions on those, I'm happy to talk about those a little bit more as well. So the terminal traits, and I'm kind of ballparking this, but roughly we're talking about a 30% heritability. And what does that actually mean? It means that we can account for roughly a third of the genetic variation in feedlot performance and carcass merit through genetics. It also means there's a lot of other factors that are going to influence those traits as well. And it's not just genetics, but genetics is a fairly significant component here of what constitutes a value in feeder cattle and calves and feeder cattle. I use those somewhat interchangeably. It's a little confusing to some people because Superior, they actually differentiate between calves and feeder cattle. So they use a little different, so maybe a little different description for what some people might actually be used to. What I'd like to do then is take you through an example of using a genetic merit pricing tool and marketing a set of calves that happen to be calves off of our ranch at a local auction market. And I want to take you through a process that we used in actually doing this and give you kind of an example. So this happens to be a livestock auction market that's about 30 miles from where our ranch is in north central South Dakota. It's an auction market that I've known of for a long, long time. So I started out by going to see the auction market people and telling them what I was interested in doing, using a tool called the feeder profit calculator that International Genetic Solutions has developed a number of years ago to actually quantify differences in both management value and genetic value. And I'll show you a little more about that in a few minutes. So part of this is conversations with the auction market people to make sure they understand what I'm hoping to do or what I'm actually wanting to do. So this is up in north central South Dakota. I put a map in here, but in north central South Dakota, we're a semi-arid kind of part of the country. We get about 18 inches of rainfall a year. If you go, you see the Missouri River flowing down through the center of the state. If you go west of the Missouri River, it's drier. Ranches tend to be bigger. We have a lot of, I'd call them 200 to 500 cow ranches in this part of the country. If you go east of the Missouri, we raise a lot more feed over in that part of the country. There's a lot more calves that would get backgrounded on the ranch, but most of those would be sold in the spring. Then we're a spring calving world primarily, probably 90 to 95% spring calving. And then you can see kind of what we have for auction markets here. And these are all fairly sizable auction markets, and they get most of the cattle out of this country. There's some of them that go to video auctions, Superior, Western, and Northern, but I would say most of them go to one of these livestock auction markets that are actually shown here. So these are the owners of the Mobridge Livestock Auction Market. They're fairly young guys, and they're interested in trying to be progressive and trying to do the good things for their producers, for the people that sell with them. They're also interested in having tools that they can use that help them compete, and particularly help them compete with video auctions. So they're interested in that. So I put a meeting together, but before I do that, I want to show you one other thing. This auction had just adopted a new software program with a set of screens in the auction market that I think really help communicate with buyers and with an audience in an auction market what we want to communicate with them. Historically, what we do is we have a shot record, and the auctioneer reads off a little information from the shot record, probably doesn't understand the words or the language, and getting the words right and getting them descriptive is hard to do. So I think a visual in an auction market is actually a big deal. I think it really helps communicate the differences here. So this happens to be the top screen up there, just communicating some vaccination information with some other information as well. I just happened to take this, but you can also communicate who the rancher is and that information as well. I put this one up here because they also put up no records. And so there's another side to this, which is if you don't provide information here, it's also pretty obvious to the buyers and to the audience that's present at the auction market. So this gentleman right here is the guy that is an IT guy for an engineering firm who has a side business of developing software for livestock auction markets. So he happens to have worked with the locals here in putting a system together that then we were hoping to take advantage of in actually marketing our calves. So I just have a few pictures in here. These are the owners and the managers and the workers in the Mobridge Livestock Auction Market. I had a presentation done by Chip Kemp, who is one of the founders of this feeder profit calculator that International Genetic Solutions has, to kind of lay out a little background for these folks. And then The young lady there happens to be the office manager, and as you might, it probably wouldn't surprise any of you, is the one that knows everything in this auction market. And I've learned that if we want to get something done there, we really have to spend time with her. But anyway, where I'm headed to next now, this next slide, and Mallory, if there's questions and you want to stop me to take any of those questions, I'm happy to do that anytime. This might be a good time. Is there anything that I should take on here at this time?
We don't have any in the chat or in the Q&A box currently.
Okay.
But I'm just making sure that everyone can hear. You're doing great in terms of volume. If you could go louder, that would be amazing.
Okay, well, I'm doing the best I can here, so.
You're totally fine. I appreciate the effort on your end. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
So International Genetic Solutions was created a number of years ago. It's really a multi-breed group that is really in the business of genetic evaluation, but they also developed this feeder profit calculator to really help describe genetic value in feeder cattle, and then also to help market cattle with genetic information, feeder cattle kind of information. So I'm going to take you through a little bit of this and show you how this works. Whoops, there we go. Okay, this is a program, and what you do is you can go online, and anybody can actually do this. And by the way, there is no cost to this. It's run out of International Genetic Solutions, and this is the information that would actually describe our ranch and our cattle. So this is now early February of last spring, 2024, and we're getting ready to sell a couple hundred steer calves from our operation. And you can see the information there. We're planning on selling them on February 8th. They were born between April 15th and June 30th. They're black, white face steer calves. They're actually, our cow herd is Simmental Angus, so these are all black calves that are Simmental Angus background. There's the vaccination history. Bovishield Gold, Vision 7 2020, that has pink eye in it. Then Bovishield Gold one shot. That's our pre-weaning vaccination, and then our booster is Bovishield Gold, which is November 30th. So they've actually had 3 rounds of a modified live by the time we actually get ready to sell them. You'll notice over on the next side, they have a relative genetic value and relative management value. The management value comes primarily from 2 things, vaccination and weaning. And wean calves, just in general, are less disease risk, and so the marketplace certainly prefers wean calves, and we get an upside of $5.51. And by the way, this base in here is the average. It's the average black calf, but it would be compared to an unweaned calf. And then the relative genetic value is $6.87 per hundredweight. So the total relative value is $12.38. This is a predicted value now. Okay, and I want to go through how we arrive at the relative genetic value, or how they arrive at it. The first thing it requires is you have to have the sires. So you have to know the sires of your calf crop and the sires of your cow herd. And by the way, you can do it without the sires of the cow herd, but you don't have the same degree of predictability that if you do all of your sires. So what you have down here on this slide is a list of registration numbers of sires with an estimate of how many, what percentage of the calves were sired by each of these sires. And you can actually see the top 2 up there. Those are Angus bulls that I purchased, so they were not in the Simmental or IGS database. So they go and grab those off of the Angus database. So those have the Angus EPDs in them. but those are all used then in the formula for predicting value based on the feeder profit calculator. So that's how that's done. And this is the biggest roadblock, I think, for most cow-calf producers, is really coming up with a list of the sires that they've actually purchased and are actually utilizing. That's one of the reasons we're trying to work with more seed stock producers, is to try to make it easier for cow-calf producers to enter the program and actually find their get their sires actually identified. So I want to make a point out of that, because this is the big deal here, and it's probably the hardest part with this whole program. So getting back then to my calves, this is February 8th, and this is Mobridge Livestock Auction, and you can actually see a set of calves on the right screen there. It brought $1,956.93. They weighed 658 pounds. There was 86 head, and that was their 61st lot of the day. So this was a pretty good market at this point in time, probably a little bit stronger than what we actually are today, although the market's still pretty strong. Now, this is, I went ahead and met with Jamie, the lady that runs the kind of the office manager, and we prepared what I wanted on the big screen. So I wanted the calf health information, the vaccination information, and a lot of our buyers have simply come to expect that. I wanted to put up there that they were weaned for 70 days. And the reason for that is we have some buyers that now see value beyond a 45-day wean and actually prefer that calves have actually been weaned longer. So these calves were weaned 70 days, so I put that specific information up there. I put the IGS feeder profit calculator total relative value plus $12.38. And I put our name up there. I want our name on there because we believe that we're raising good cattle, and we want the marketplace to actually know that. In addition to this, I provided printed out certificates to people that I thought were likely buyers, and we actually handed those out. They have a lot more information, probably in most cases too much information for anyone to absorb just without having time to sit down and really kind of study it. So to me, this is kind of the key information that we want to put out, in that IGS feeder profit calculator total relative value plus $12.38. So you might be thinking, well, what do the buyers think of this? Do they think they're actually worth that? And I would say probably most of them are not like, they're interested. It's maybe affecting them a little bit, but it's really hard to measure that. And I'm going to show you a way that we try to measure that as well. So this is the set now. So they divided our calves into two sizable bunches that's sorted at the auction market, primarily by weight, trying to get some fairly uniform bunches. And this is just some of those in the auction market here in Mobridge, South Dakota. Okay, now we had two lots. One was 98 head. They weighed 567 pounds. They brought 330 a hundredweight, and they brought $1,871 a head. The second bunch was 86 head. They weighed 658 pounds. They brought $297.50 and $1,958 a head. And the first thing several people have asked me is, why don't the heavier calves bring a lot more than the lighter calves? Because they're heavier. And the reason is really not that complicated. When you get to this time of year in our market up here, the price difference between heavy and light calves is not that big. And that's because we have a grass market for what we call yearling cattle up here. You might call them stocker cattle in Tennessee. They're going back to grass. And a lot of people at this time of year start buying their grass cattle, and they would prefer these lighter calves. And so you see a price difference here that's only, less than $100 a head, when you've got, almost 100 pounds, 90 some pounds difference in weight of these calves. So then what did we learn from doing this? So again, by the way, I put this out on Facebook, so because I had put it out before, And it makes a lot of people kind of watch what's actually going on and has some interest in that. Here is I put in some comments from some of the people that actually saw what we were doing and were making some comments about it. But I want to also show you something else here, because I think there's better ways of evaluating how we're doing price-wise. So this is what the auction market prints out after the sale and posts on their website. And you can go in and look at the price every lot brought, the size of the lot, the description of the lot, and you can see how they're being described. That first lot there is our 98 head lot, weighing 567 pounds. And then this is the next lot, the 86 head, weighing 658 pounds. So you can get a little bit of an idea of how we did relative to others, but it's not easy to do that. It's not easy to look at that and tell really how well you did and compared to other lots in the area. So let's see. I don't know if I can move that box. Mallory, is there a way to move I have the box of my view and your box is over the top of my slide here. Is there a way I can change that?
I gotcha. There may be a way if you click your video camera to change the view in which you see each of your participants or panelists.
Okay, let me see here now.
Or you're able to click and drag the screen as well. Maybe you can click
Maybe
it.
do that. Maybe that's better, huh? How about it? Did that help? Can we see the graph I've created?
Yes, if you put it back in presentation view or just in slideshow view from the current slide, we'll see the whole, there we go, perfect.
You can see it all.
Yes.
Okay, I'll just go on then. So
perfect.
what I did here is I took all the lots in the sale that day and I created a simple linear regression. So if you look at the bottom where I've got calf weights, and then on the vertical axis, I've got price per head. So what that line actually represents is the average price per head at each weight. And as you will see, you get quite a bunch above the line and quite a bunch below the line. And so the question is, then how did our calves do relative to that particular line? That's the question I'm really asking. And so if you go over, I think I have it in this next one, these arrows point out the two lots that we sold in that sale. So you can see the top lot, the 567 pound lot has a relatively high price compared to, well, almost all the lots that would be in that weight range. You can actually see that difference. You see the same thing with the 658 pound. Okay, but I also want to tell you that this is really not a fair comparison. And the reason it's not a fair comparison is because our lots were much bigger than most of the lots in the sale. And so bigger lots bring higher prices. And it's actually rather significant, the differences in the size of the lots and how it affects price. So this next slide, what I've actually done is I'm only choosing the lots that are 40 head and above. So with 40 head and above lots, thinking that that's a more fair comparison, you can see we're above the average, but we're not as far above the average. We're about, what are we? Probably $80 above the average on our lighter calves and probably, maybe something similar to that on our heavier calves. And then I went one step further. I said, what if you just compare them to lots that are 40 head and bigger that have that are just black calves? We take the other colored calves out of this and they're just black calves. Well, they're still above average, but they're not as far above average. Probably we're maybe like $60 on the heavier calves and maybe more like $30 or $40 on the lighter calves. So I bring this up because I think this is a tool to help us really evaluate how well we're actually doing in a fairer way, because the market itself is actually you know, we're comparing to the calves that sold that day in that auction market. So I think that is a good way to start to really look at these kinds of things. So what I would say, what did we learn in this process? We learned that our auction market people were very cooperative and very helpful. It created a number of conversations about our feeder profit calculator, and I would say genetics in general, and how we look at genetics when we're actually selling feeder cattle, how we try to quantify genetics, EPDs and indexes. I would say communication is the key. Did we get paid more? I think we did, but it's not something, you know, that is that clear. And the question I asked then, is the opportunity there? And I think it actually is. So what I'm kind of saying tonight is that I think there's a lot of opportunity here as we look down the road and we look at ways that we can measure and quantify genetic information and how we use that. And then both how we describe the value of feeder cattle, even in a retained ownership kind of program, but even more so when we look at how we market livestock and how we bring genetic information in with calf health information and use that in helping to quantify genetic value, management value of feeder cattle, and ultimately how we use that to do a better job as cow-calf producers. I think there's efficiencies to be gained in our industry. You know, I think we've made a fair amount of genetic progress, but we also have to remember that a lot of our traits, a lot of our genetic traits have antagonisms, and historically terminal traits would be antagonistic with maternal traits. So we want to in thinking about a cow-calf operation, balance is important. It's really, really important in our operation. We have a somewhat of a terminal sire program, but not completely a terminal sire program, and that's driven a lot by pasture situations, and there's a lot of other considerations there as well. So with that, Mallory, I'm going to stop. Maybe I'll take a few questions, and then we'll maybe ask Jennifer for some comments here, but maybe I'll take, if there's a few questions first that you'd like me to take, I can do that.
Great. We don't have any in the chat box or the Q&A box currently, but that doesn't mean people are typing so far. And so I'll give them a second just to see if they have any questions at this little stopping point, and if not, we'll go from there.
Okay, well, you just tell me when you want to start again.
Great.
And then I think Jennifer's with us, so I'll bring her in here in a few minutes, but let's see if there are any questions first.
Perfect.
Well, if you're not getting any, what I would suggest is many of you may know Jennifer Houston. Jennifer is in the livestock marketing business. She's also a past president of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association and a well-known figure in the beef industry. And so Jennifer is on our genetic merit pricing task force. And Jennifer, if you were there, she might have stepped away because she's also working today. And we'll probably know if she's there by whether her mute button is removed or not. Are you there, Jennifer?
She may be away interacting with a customer, but we do have some questions in the chat box or in the Q&A box if you're up for answering.
You bet. Okay, I'm looking at, I've got this up. I've got, is it in the more? Q&A, yes. Okay.
Q&A, yes, and it should be in the open questions. And as you answer, I'll clear them from your screen.
Okay, let me start out with the top here. The question is, do you see a general move by cattle auctions in this direction? Uh, I would say uh, to some degree. I've had in the Northern Plains here several conversations with people that are in the auction market business. And also we have Livestock Marketing Association representatives up here that call on livestock auction markets. I think there's an interest. Uh, we also have to really understand their business, which is uh, it's basically moving cattle through efficiently. So we can't do things that slow that down. So that's why I think one of the challenges I've learned from Mobridge Livestock is all the information that they would like to accompany, they want that put up the night before the sale, okay, so that they can be ready to go to have it up when in fact it's time to sell those particular calves. And they have a little trouble getting their clientele to get that information to them ahead of time. So that's one of the challenges that I would actually see. But I would say my observation in talking to a number of people in the auction market business is they're different, just like everybody else. If they see a way that this helps them compete and helps them compete in growing numbers, they are very interested. And so I would say the Mobridge livestock auction is very interested. So I think I'm seeing some growth there, but time will tell. It's pretty early in this process. You know, I like to say that the last 20 years, if we look at changes in feeder cattle marketing, the last 20 years were primarily about health. I would argue the next 20 years are going to be heavily about genetics. I think if you look at what's happening in the world of genomics and you look at what's happening in particularly in other species, I think we're going to see some significant movement here in terms of how genetics are influenced, how they're changed, and I think that'll end up having a lot of uptake. I got a few other questions. One is, what's the best way to get your sale barn on board? I would say there's nothing more important than just going and sitting down and having the conversation and probably educating yourself. That's a really important process. I think the in understanding their business and understanding the challenges that they face in their business as well. Would you consider your tool better for marketing, for sale, or for evaluating for purchase? I would actually consider those to be both the same. In other words, is the value more for the seller or is the value more for the buyer? And I think if it's truly evaluating and quantifying genetic value, it ought to be equal in value to the seller and the buyer. Do you see value in this approach for a smaller breeder, 20 head herds? I think so, but and Jennifer, if she was on, she could probably comment on this better than I. The challenge you have is, and we see this here, is buyers are putting together truckload size lots. And I think this issue of being the small breeder is how do you help the buyer create uniform groups of truckload size lots? And that's a challenge. And I know many states in the Southeast have worked on trying to have, trying to help producers put together calves so you can sell truckload size lots. But it's difficult with the small herds. I would be the first one to admit that. And in the 200 calves that we sold, we had the two big lots, and then we probably had 4 calves that they sorted off that I didn't like them sorting them off. We up here we get frozen ears, and you get some frozen ears and short ears, and then they want to sort them off, and then you lose a couple $100 on them, and that never does seem right to me because their short ears don't reduce their feedlot performance or their carcass merit. But that's how the world operates. So the question on the bottom here, the numeric value that is calculated, is that the increase in value you can expect for your calves for following this program? I would say it a little bit differently. It's the value that we believe is there, but the market will not be paying that value. The buyers won't be paying that value until they have confidence that that value is actually there. And so that probably takes time, and it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen overnight. And so I don't think, I think in our case, we got paid a little more, but I also can't sort that out. We've sold calves in this market, and some of these people might be paying based on our reputation, and maybe not so much on the not so much on just the formula itself. Okay, I've got one down here. Once you adjusted the regression analysis for confounding factors like lot size and color, it appeared that your lots earned a premium of $10 to $12 a hundredweight, which supports the calculator's estimated relative value. Given that half of the relative value is attributed to genetics, is the added expense of weaning 70 days an additional round of vaccination worth the now diminished premium? Oh boy, this is some smart guy here who's trying to get me to think about this a little bit. It is true, okay? First of all, this is true based on the superior data. As calves get heavier, the premium for vaccination and weaning is actually less, and it's less per hundredweight. And the reason for that is as calves get heavier, they have a little less risk for disease. The question is about the added expense of weaning, and there is an added expense of weaning 70 days, but there's also, weight gain during that period of time. So, we would kind of hope our weight gain is offsetting. And part of it, I will just tell you honestly, we set our calving dates in part by the weather, but we also set them in part because we know this lighter cattle market in January and February is a pretty darn good market to sell into, especially in the face of low cattle numbers, because we got buyers who have a lot of grass and they're already putting those calves together way back in February. So, but I think your statement there is probably correct. You anonymous attendee. So Jennifer's with us now, and so what I'd like to do is introduce Jennifer again. In the auction market business in Tennessee, she knows your local world much better than I do. Past president of National Cattlemen's Beef Association, and today she's taking cattle at the market. So she's the genuine thing here today. So Jennifer, why don't you share any comments you might have?
Thank you, Ken. Yeah, I'm sorry, and you see me in my working clothes and my working face. I had a little my miscommunication about what went on tonight, or I wouldn't have had to do the back two. A couple of things. Yeah, what Ken has done with his cattle is super interesting. I will say at this point, it works better for larger groups of single owner cattle. And we've got to look at the way, at least certainly in our part of Tennessee, and I grew up in West Tennessee, so I've sort of been around the whole state. A lot of times we have to add value to our smaller herds and our smaller groups of cattle. Now, having said that, Tennessee Department of Agriculture has done a lot of studies on the fact that if you can group as little as 5, you're going to get a premium over singles. And so we sell singles on our Wednesday sale. On our Friday sales, we have graded feeder calf sales. They're a large part of our business. We've been doing them since the mid-60s, where you bring your cattle in, and it's very familiar to East Tennessee people, not as familiar to West Tennessee and parts of Middle Tennessee. You bring your cattle in, they're graded by state graders, they're weighed, and then they're grouped according to like a number 1 450 pound black white face steer is grouped with all the other number 1 4 to 450 pound black white face steers. You keep your individual weights, but then they're sold by the pen. and then you get the price the pen brought. So you get the price of it, maybe even a tractor trailer load lot, if that many in your weight range arrives. About information, Ken's got gobs of information about his cattle, and it makes all the difference in the world. What we say is the more you know, whatever that is better. So even if you sell on a regular sale, not in a feeder calf sale, and you know you've got your vaccination program, you've got your weaning program, if you know your bulls, whatever you know gives that buyer more ammunition to pay more for your cattle. And I think that's super important. We have a lot of what we call our premium sales, where all the cattle have had 2 rounds of vaccinations, at least 45 days weaned. That's information that helps add value to the cattle. The more you know, the more buyers. Responding to the question about is vaccination, the 3rd round still worth it? I think Ken answered it really well about what you get on the farm. The second thing from my perspective is we won't repeat buyers. So even though they might have all the genetic merit in the world, we want their health to be as good as can. And so we have people that say, is it worth the double vaccine? Is it worth the 45 days weaning? You want that buyer as a seller and me as a marketer, when they get those cattle, that they have the least amount of problems with them possible. So commingled cattle are going to have a few more problems than maybe the loads off the farm that Ken sells, but we can mitigate that a lot by selling in the premium sales where they all have very similar 2nd round modified live, 2 rounds of vaccinations for respiratory diseases, blackleg, all that type thing, pastorella, whatever you can do that adds value to your cattle. We would like to move to what Ken is doing. But, it's hard to get a lot of cattlemen to agree to all do the same thing. We have tried that in the past as far as using the same bulls, and people are just pretty darn independent, I think, across the nation, but certainly in Tennessee. So whatever you can do in your market, most markets will work with you. Even though maybe you might not have seen this at their market, you can say, if I bring my cattle in and we can group them in the gear again, grouping involves making your cattle uniform, getting a defined calving season, things that we don't do as well sometimes in the South and Tennessee as they do in other parts of the nation, so that you have uniform calves. So if I can, when you bring in a load, like I just unloaded a minute ago, and he's got 2 old coal cows, he's got a 700-pound bull calf, he's got a 450-pound heifer. There's not a lot of grouping you can do to that. But if somebody brings me in a group of, 6-weight black steers, they're all fairly uniform, then I can sell those even on a Wednesday sale where most of the cattle are sold individually in a group, and they're going to bring quite a bit of premium. So again, it's sort of like the more you know, and I call it baby steps for us in Tennessee. Well, you're not necessarily, unless you have a pretty large cow herd. When we sell our video cattle, we do more what Ken's talking about. We may not know genetics because that's sort of the last step, but we certainly know more about the feeding conditions, the weighing conditions, exactly what vaccines, exactly when they were given. And we send that out to our buyers ahead of when we sell our video cattle, which basically works for us much better for stocker people than cow-calf, because most of my cow-calf guys can't put a tractor trailer load or 50,000 pounds together of like kind. So again, most of our video cattle are sold or stocker people, but you can work towards that, or you can work with your neighbors. So if you have neighbors that you get along with that have similar cattle, that you can put together a tractor trailer load. Trucking, unfortunately, if you're in the South, plays a big part in what cattle bring, because it's going to cost a lot of money to get them where they're going. We're a lot further from the feeding area than some people are. So whatever you can do to help that, a buyer wants to buy as bigger groups as he can, so he's not taking that truck and getting 2 here and 3 there and assembling them in a dealer place. So that's a little bit the way that we work in Tennessee. I'm trying to see if there's any extra questions. There may not be. Nope, not any open questions now. but I'll be happy to answer any questions specifically if anybody has any. And again, apologize for my late being in and being in and out on this, but be happy to talk to anybody. I'm here in the state. If you want to give me a call, Mallory knows how to find me, or your extension agent, I'm sure, knows how to find me.
Jennifer Ken here. You have a program in Tennessee, and I actually forget what you call it, but it's helps producers buy better bulls.
Right, Tennessee Ag Enhancement Program. Yes, sir.
And so would you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, we have seen, that's a good point. A tremendous improvement in our feeder cattle for our producers who take advantage of that. It's a cost share program. A lot of you are probably familiar with it. There's not a lot of guidelines. You need to be BQA, Beef Quality Assurance certified. You apply a certain time of the year, and it's different from markets than it is for cow calf. So I'm trying to remember, Mallory may know exactly when you apply. But you can apply for cost share on a bull, which allows you to buy maybe a better bull than you would have the money to do otherwise. So I think if you ask anybody around here in our business over the last, what have we been doing it, 20 years, something like that, we have seen a tremendous improvement in the feeder cattle just from the quality of bulls that people have bought, which also allows them to keep back better quality heifers. And the net result is their feeder cattle are better quality.
Yeah, there is one question here that I'm going to click on answer live. The question is, why aren't there feedlots in the Southeast? And maybe in just a minute or two, I'll try to answer that. But the feedlot industry in the U.S. is heavily concentrated in the high plains. So if you take basically 4 states, maybe 5, you take Texas, Kansas, Nebraska, Colorado, Iowa, maybe put Oklahoma in there. And the reason that's where the cattle feeding industry is, it's because of the development of irrigation in the 50s and 60s. And so cattle feeding basically left the Midwest. It's a little strong statement. There's still cattle feeding in the Midwest, but in a large way, the big commercial feedlots are pretty much in the high plains.
Yeah, I've got to run, but I'll add 2 things. They have a lot of corn and they don't have mud.
Yep.
Our winters are just too muddy, but I've got a trailer coming in. So again, sorry I've got to run, but thank you all for being with us tonight.
Thanks, Jennifer. Yes. Okay. Mallory, anything else? Oh, I see. Got a couple of questions here that I'll take. I see this person says, I see some of the challenges of buyer awareness of the carcass merit of a particular sire and or a breed. And I would say that's true. And I think part of what we're really trying to do is communicate, I'll call it differences in potential for carcass merit. And so I think that's obviously in this equation. Marbling would be particularly important at this stage of our where we're at in this industry. So yes, I think that's a big issue. And then there's another question here. It says, is there a clearinghouse that could organize the smaller farm or farmers? Not, I guess I don't really know of one anyway that could actually do that. I think, there's a lot of cost that goes into kind of an attempt to put together the smaller groups, as Jennifer was really trying to talk about that. So I guess not that I'm aware of. Okay.
There we go. All right. It seems I have one more question for you, if that's okay.
Let's see, where is that one? Okay, the question is that I think it's Evan Willis. What is your experience with retained ownership? How is it structured financially? Well, there is a fair amount of retained ownership. But in my part of the world, in the Northern Plains, probably not so much. I'd say probably 80 to 90% of our cow-calf producers would sell calves either off the cow in the fall, because we're mostly spring calving, or would background them for, I'd say, 45 to 100, 120 days background in the spring. Usually they want to get the calves sold before they start farming. So up here, that's about April sometime. And so usually they want to get the calves sold through that period of time. There's been an argument towards retained ownership for many people who argue that if you really raise good cattle, you ought to want to retain ownership on them. It's complicated because there's a lot of risk involved with retained ownership as well. And if you look at a good share of our cow-calf producers, they're not necessarily well equipped to manage that risk. And so, the history is that there's a lot of them that have tried retained ownership that have went back to selling calves again. So I would say that's kind of the situation. Okay. Anything else?
Not that I'm seeing currently. We just had a question about attendance in the chat box, so I took care of that. But if anyone else has any last minute questions, please feel free to use the chat box or the Q&A box, and we'll get those answered certainly. Additionally,
there's an answer here. Somebody gave an answer in regard to, I'd say, well, let me just read the answer. Additionally, producers in the Southeast tend to capitalize on the amount of forage available for cow-calf producers as well. There are additional resources at utbeef.com that better explain this question as well. Great question.
My master's degree was spent primarily working with tall fescue, so I may be a little bit biased in that answer.
Well, you can answer the question then.
I just know enough to be dangerous is all.
Okay.
I don't see any last minute questions, but if anyone has any, I'd love to send them to you if that's okay with you.
Sure, that's fine. Yep.
And that one more thing, I saw that someone had commented that the TAEP application period is October 1st through the 7th. I knew that was the application period, but I'm glad one of our participants spoke up with that answer just to solidify that. I didn't want to give any false information out there. So just a fun fact for our ag enhancement program.
Okay, very good. Anything else?
Don't see anything currently, but if there are any other questions, I will send them your way so we can get those answered, if that's okay with you.
Well, I've enjoyed being part of your webinar here, so it's been my pleasure to participate.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Dr. Lawman also commented that he would take $3.30 for our calves all day long. So
okay. Well, he can do that. He's a smart guy. He can probably get that done.
I'm sure he can.
Okay.
So that wraps up this webinar tonight, our third webinar of the Master Beef series. We certainly thank you, Dr. Odde, for joining us tonight alongside Miss Jennifer Houston to share some more information. In the future, if you have to miss a webinar, it's totally fine. We'll have recordings available on YouTube. If you reach out to your local extension agent, they will have the resources necessary to get to that link, just because it's not a public link. And so, again, be sure to reach out to your local extension agent if you need that link. I saw a question about Thursday. So on Thursday, we're actually, we have an economist coming to talk more about just the cattle economy and things of that nature that are out of my depth. So I'll save that topic for them certainly. But again, if anyone has any questions about the webinar, attendance, tonight's information, please feel free to reach out to me or your local extension agent, and we'll direct those questions immediately. But again, thank you, Dr. Odde, and we'll see everyone Thursday. Thanks.